kids and the ones that down on the streets, no, they was not. They was never a dull instrument. They was never nothing brought up about alcohol.
So they had this pavilion, so kind of like covered like.
Oh yeah, it had a roof over it. It had benches in it. It was just a beautiful place.
And an ice cream parlor. What kind of ice cream did they have?
They had all kinds of hard dip ice cream. You could buy the cones, and if you didn't have the money, if there's 3 of you and 2 of them got an ice cream cone, he'd give the third one just because he knew he didn't have the money to pay for it. So it was just a different world to grow up in than what it is today. And
do you know who it was that ran the ice cream parlor?
A guy by the name of Ed Fisher. He run the post office at the time, and just on a side thing, he had a ice cream he sold inside. He made money off of that. I know when we'd go to the post office, we'd always ask our mother if she had a nickel or whatever that we could have to get an ice cream cone. Most of the time, we would get it.
And you said there was a unique way of when they would bring the mail in and drop it.
Yeah, that was a fun thing for the kids. They had a special place that they hung the mail beside of the railroad tracks, and when the train come by, they would take the mail off of it hung on an arm made for that, and when this train come by, they had a thing that would snatch that mail right off of the rack and pull it inside. And when they did that, they would also throw out the bag of mail that goes in that area. So we'd be up there to watch this transaction, and we'd carry the mail back to the post office. And then he would use that same bag to send out the mail the next day and take it back up and hang it on the hanger that they had made for that.
So was there daily train service if somebody wanted to get on the train?
We had a depot that you could go any day of the week and catch a train and go into Moorhead or any other towns close by. They stopped at every town, and it was a passenger train. When it came through, it come from Ashland, I believe. It'd go to Ashland, Moorhead, and all points that way, and they run morning and evening, I think. And if you caught it in the morning to go to town, it would come back in the evening, and you could come back and get off at the same place you caught it. So they had a schedule set up that you could go to the depot and pick up a schedule, and you know what time to be there.
And was it costly? I mean, did average people ride the train?
Every person that went to Moorhead either caught the Greyhound or they'd go ride the train. Now the Greyhound come through there at a certain time of the day, and they would stop and pick up passengers on the street, on the side of the road or anywhere that you could flag them down. That's just the way they were back then. They didn't only stop in town, but they would pick up people on the way. And depending on where they picked you up at is the amount that it would cost you to go into town. And I think from where we're at the Haldeman School into Moorhead I think it was like 10 or 15 cents, and you could get a ride into town. Or if you went to Hayes Crossing, they had a store in Hayes Crossing that sold tickets from Hayes Crossing to Moorhead. You could buy a Greyhound ticket, and I think there's one in that book that you'll see when you're looking there. It's interesting.
And then, but you had a depot. Where was the depot in Haldeman?
The depot was up about a block, I'd say, from the post office. They had maybe 2 blocks. See, they had 2 brickyards. There's one they called the first brickyard there. They referred to it as the old brickyard. And then they had the new one there, which is the one by the Haldeman School. That was the new brickyard. So the depot was like right in between the two.
And the trains would take out the bricks that were made?
No, they had trains and they had rails that they could shift in and bring the trains right into the brickyard. They could switch tracks, so they had the passenger trains, the freight trains all run on the same track. There's only one track that went through there, so they all had specific times that they could come in and go out. But they would switch the box cars into the school, into the brickyard, which came down by the school area there. And then they would unload the keels and stack them into the cars. And then at a certain time, then they would come back and hook onto them and pull them out and take them wherever in the country they're taking them to. But as kids, and my father working there, he would load the cars. They would help stack the bricks into the cars. But each car come in was had been hauling something different. Cotton, we would get cotton seeds out of them box cars and plant them and grow cotton in patches, just experimental thing. They had peanuts. We'd get peanuts out of them box cars that was left that didn't get unloaded, like shovel in the bottom, and we would plant those. Different things. We enjoyed every inch of life there was to enjoy and go through everything that came through there. It was really interesting, an experience I wouldn't trade for the world.
And how did they get, now the clay mines were there as well as the brickyard where they were making the bricks, right?
Yeah, there was a clay mine. There was clay mines all over Brown County, Carter County. They were just scattered all over that hauled clay into that. But one that I remember the most is the one that sat right behind my house and right above the school. And they would mine the clay, and they had a track set up where they would pull it out of the mines and take it over in front of the brickyard. And then they had a track going down across the highway into the brickyard that the cars run under. And they would lower that car that's loaded with clay. They had special cars that they put the clay in, and they would lower it down into the brickyard from 1,000 foot up on the hill. It was practically straight down, and they'd lower it down, and they used a engine with a rope like 3-inch diameter, huge rope and cables that they wrap around this motor that turns, and it would, as it turned, it would lower that car down.
So it wasn't like sliding on a cable or something?
On a cable. They had, the cable was hooked to the back of the car that had the clay. And the speed that motor was turning would let that car go down them tracks into the brickyard. And then when they unloaded the car, they would dump it and unload it, and then that cable, they would reverse it, and it would pull that car back up to the top of the hills where they could reload the second load of it. So they always had several cars up there, so as soon as one come back, they would send another one down. And the brickyard itself had a lake, a huge water reserve, a pond that us kids dearly loved, because that was the only fishing spot in the country that we could walk to. And we would go there on weekends. Usually the brickyards were shut down, and we could walk through the brickyard and go to the pond and fish all day long and enjoy that. It was a beautiful place. Muddy water. They used it for the bricks and things.
Did they stock it, or where were the fish coming from? Did they stock
the fish? I don't know, but it was full of them. I can tell you ponds that nobody that I ever heard of put a fish in them, but they're full of fish today. I don't know how they get there, but they do. But I could imagine somebody in time started them in there, and then it just got to where we could get tons of fish. And being 5 of us boys, or 3 of us at the time, we would go up and fish all day, and we would get enough fish for a meal about any day. And if we did good, we'd get 2 days. But it was fun, enjoyable, and everything was safe. We knew when what not to do. So.
And so there were some people that were working there that were working actually in the clay mines, and then some people that were working to manufacture the bricks.
Yes, yeah. They was more people working in the clay mines, scattered around over the area, than they were at the brickyard. I think at the brickyard, somebody told me at one time that they had like 400 people working in there. Of course, they run 2 or 3 shifts.
And that includes the miners, or
no,
just the people
just
working in the
brickyards. And the miners, gee, I know they totaled way more than that, because they was. I don't know how many mines it'd be, but Holloman wasn't the only brickyard there. 3-4 mile away, in what they called Hayward back then, was another brickyard that they made brick. And then Olive Hill was another brickyard. They made brick. So all of these brickyards needed clay. So all of these clay mines were just popping up everywhere. And they furnished all of the brickyards with clay. So they had Hitchens, they had Olive Hill, they had Hayward, they had Holloman, they had brickyards everywhere.
And did it pay different when you were working in the mines versus in the brickyards?
I think, best I can remember, the miners got paid more because it was dangerous.
So you were like deep mines going down in.
Yes, all of their mining was deep down in the ground, and I can't say that I ever knowed of a person that got killed in a clay mine. If it would be very rare that anybody ever got hurt. They did a lot of safety in them things. And I cannot remember anybody that I knew or heard tell of that got hurt in mines like that. Of course, they must have been, but I didn't know of them. But there was lots of mines. There's still lots of mines. The one that was behind our house was interesting to us kids, because we would go up and they had where they went into the mines and mined it out. Then they would be flood area in around it where the water flooded through it, and we would swim in that. And it was nothing but sulfur water. We'd come out and we would look as dark as a table from in that sulfur water. But
did you ever get sick from?
No, we never got sick. We didn't know what it was to get sick. I'm serious. We never got sick. We were, I don't know, germs wouldn't live on us, I guess.
Did they have any kind of clinic, or was there a doctor in town?
We had a clinic at the brickyard. Had their own hospital. But all of the kids, like all of us kids, were born at home. Neighbors would help, doctors, no. Louise Cottle, maybe during the term of pregnancy, would make a trip out and check on whoever might get word to them. But we had no telephones, we had no car. So when the lady, mother or whatever, gets pregnant, you can't depend on getting to a doctor, because there was no way, no phone, no cars, no way getting there. So you depend on your neighbor. So when the time comes for the kid to be born, then you holler for the neighbor. And it worked vice versa. My mother, our neighbors, they had kids the same age as we were. My mother and our neighbors grew up together, and it was all practically the same age. So they helped each other. When we were playing, kids was playing in the creek, getting cut with glass where people threw glass away. There was a person down the street that's supposed to be the 7th daughter, or the 7th son, or the 7th something or another, and she'd come up and in her theory, she could stop blood. So she would come up and say a few witchcraft words over you, leave out, we'd live through it.
Interesting. Do you remember what her name was?
No, this lady was 80 years old when I was 9 years old. But I can remember her well. It was interesting. And I know my dad was a firm believer in some of that stuff, and he would tell one of the other kids, you go down and get this lady and tell her to come up here, that we've got a kid that's injured. And she would come up there in a hurry and do what she had to do and say what she had to say and be gone in 10 minutes.
Did people pay her for that, or she
No.
just did it to help out?
No, that was just a way of life. And she had the,
The gift?
I guess you'd call it the gift to do that. Now, I'm not a believer in that, but we lived. I'm here today. Whether I would have been here without that or not, I don't know. But interesting things. Interesting. Very interesting. The kids, when we all had friends that lived in the area. We all played together from daylight to dark. We knew each other, family. If we were at the neighbor's kid when it come dinner time and she had a meal, we eat. If our kids were at our house come dinner time, the meal was ready, we eat. So it was not like they were outcast or we were outcast. We were all family. Everybody was family.
And did most people make their living the same way? Most people had gardens. Most people worked in the brickyards or the
Everybody
mines.
back then had gardens, regardless. And everybody helped each other with their gardens, too. If weeds were bad in one garden and you had 6 boys out here running up and down the road doing nothing, they would stop and help clean it out. It was a different way of life than what it is today. And now the only time we got paid for any chores where we helped other people or neighbors is when it come to stripping tobacco for the market. When they grow their tobacco, they would hang it into the barn, and it would hang there during the early part of the winter, fall, until it dried out, till it turned real brown, and then they'd have to wait for it a damp day to what they say, bring it into case so it wouldn't break up on them, and then they would strip every leaf off of that tobacco stalk and put it in 5 different grades, and that's how they had to sell it. So we would line up like 5 people here, 5 over there, and they would lay a 10-foot stack of tobacco stalks with leaves on them, and first person would take it up and take off the parts that he wanted, pass it to the next one, all the way down the line, and they would pay us like 50 cents an hour. We could make $4 a day doing that. But sometimes we'd work like 10-hour days to get it done, because you have to work on tobacco, and I guess they still do today when the weather's right. If it's dry, you can't touch it because it'll just shatter up and you're losing money that way. So we had jobs doing that, and also when it come time in the spring to set out the planks, they would hire us to come and help them set out the tobacco planks. So that we made money on. And the kids, they made money. We would go pick berries like blackberries, and we would sell them for, the highest I ever got paid was 50 cents for a gallon, and that was up when I was a teenager. And the only way we'd get that much money would be to bring it to Moorhead, where there were more demand for it than what they were around us. So normal, when we were growing up, 25 cents, maybe a gallon would be a big price.
Because everybody went out and picked. Everybody that had kids anyway.
Today, on the internet, back last spring or last summer, blackberry time, I think July, they were like $40 some a gallon. That is a long way from 50 cents.
A long way. And there were, was the community very diverse? Were there any African American families?
No. We had 2 families of colored people that lived in our area, and I think that included Moorhead too. I really don't think it was any colored people in Moorhead at the time I grew up. It's sad, but that's the way it was. I know when we would go to Moorhead to a movie, the Greyhounds would come into the bus station, and I remember it well. They had the places where the colored would have to go eat inside of the bus station. They had bathrooms for the colored, and we didn't go in there, and they didn't go in ours, and that's just the way it was at that time. Sad to say, but as far as anybody staying in there, living in Moorhead, I don't know of any except the 2 people that lived by us, the 2 colored people, and they were the nicest, sweetest people you ever met. We fished with them, we talked with them every day, we walked with them. They were no different than we were.
And did they work in the brickyards or the mines?
One of them worked at the brickyard at the time. The other one made moonshine for a living, and he would bring it into Moorhead. He would walk into Moorhead every day. That's a 7-mile walk, and he would walk into Moorhead every morning carrying a doctor's satchel full of whiskey, and he would had his customers in Moorhead that he would bring it to, and then he would go back at night and he would make more underneath the floor of his house, and the next day he'd be on the road again. So that was just a routine thing for him. Now the other colored guy, he worked at the brickyard. He was well respected. He worked just like all the other men. He worked hard. But his kid, he had a kid. This guy, when we grew up, had a family. And I know one of them was on the board of directors at the Citizens Bank. So he grew up to be a smart, rich person. He had a cattle farm in Flemingsburg up toward the end. And I don't know what other businesses he might have been involved in, but up until the day he died, he always invited the people he grew up with to come out to his farm, and they would cook up barbecue. He was just the friendliest, best guy that you ever met.
And what was his name?